Congresswoman, welcome back to the program here. Colin Allred finished 10 points ahead of you in the primary. What do you believe voters were telling you about your campaign that night?
I think they were saying is what we saw was an incredible surge of new voters, of people who came out to vote that no one was expecting. We had almost 72,000 people vote in this election. And I think generally most of us thought we'd have a turnout of around 30 to 35,000. So almost 40,000 people extra voted. The fact that Colin had spent $100 million boosting his name ID over the last 3 years. And for people who didn't know or hadn't been communicated by neither myself or the two other candidates in the race, that Colin didn't just win this outright is a big problem for him. I just think it just demonstrates a lot of weakness that he has. He had a 16-point drop off from Jasmine Crockett, so he has no mandate in this race. We're feeling really excited. You know, the people that came out to vote, who voted for me, came to vote for me because they know me. They want me to be their representative. Colin got a lot of votes from people who just came to vote for the Senate race, didn't necessarily know a lot about the down ballot and knew his name. And I don't know if those people come back out.
And that's the question, whether anyone else shows back up. Well, let me rephrase that. The question now is whether the surge in voters who showed up for the primary will also now show up for the May 26th runoff. Are you changing anything in your campaign to make sure you try to grab those voters if they are interested in returning?
Well, absolutely. We're going to be communicating with all those folks who chose to vote. You know, we had this incredible surge of I don't know the exact number, but tens of thousands of voters voted for the first time ever. And I think that is great for our democratic process. I am so pleased that so many people came out to vote, to participate in our democracy. As an elected official, somebody who's been involved in politics for some time, the biggest frustration is voter apathy, where they don't think their vote matters or they have no reason to participate. So the fact that we saw this huge turnout across the state is a demonstration that people are waking up, that their vote does matter, their elected officials do matter, and their vote has consequences. So I'm thrilled to see it. And we're going to be working really hard like we always do. I have an incredible ground game, lots of support out there from volunteers and donors across the state and people who want to engage. So we're really excited about going into the runoff.
Congresswoman, talk strategy with us here for a moment. How do you close a 10-point gap, though, with such a short amount of time, 3 months before this runoff?
Well, we actually have longer for the runoff than we did for the primary. Given the fact that nothing really got started until after January because of the filing and then the holidays and everything. And so, we're just going to keep doing. We had a chance to communicate to a large number of people, and now we have that much more time. All of our polling shows that when we can communicate our message and compare my record to Colin Allred's record, he didn't do anything in Congress, and people are frustrated with that. He didn't do anything to address affordability. He didn't do anything to address minimum wages. He didn't do anything to address health care. I've legislation and have led on all of those issues that directly affect people. And when we have time, it just gives us more time. So we're ready to go. We're not letting up the gas. My team is all still intact, and we're pedal to the metal.
But why do you think that he scored so much higher on primary night then?
I just think this huge, well, just like I said earlier, we had almost 42,000 voters turn out that nobody communicated with, that we weren't expecting. He spent $100 million on his name ID over the last couple years. Sure. The fact that he didn't just knock this out of the park demonstrates that he doesn't necessarily have this strong base of support among reliable base voters who we were able to communicate with really aggressively. That's where we got all of our support from. And I'm excited. I think that the odds of the folks that supported me turning out into the runoff is a lot higher than the votes he got. So, we're just going to take it out there. We're going to go talk to every voter. We're going to try to earn everyone's vote, turn our base out, and run a positive issue-based campaign, focusing on the issues that are really affecting folks. And that's what we're going to do.
And to make sure I'm clear here, runoffs are notoriously really low voter turnout, especially this one, May 26th, just after Memorial Day here. Do you expect many of those brand new voters who showed up March 3rd to come back and vote May 26th in the runoff?
Hard to know. Historically speaking, that does not usually bode out well. historically speaking, to your point, runoffs are low. It's the diehards of the diehard voters who come out for a runoff, and that's a large part of our base of support. And again, it's about operational and ground game. I think anyone will say that I have a superior ground game to any candidate out there. We've run a lot of hard races. My folks know how to turn out the vote and go in there and do that. And so, I'll put my ground game against anyone's on a runoff. And so we're pretty excited about it. We're raising money. We've had a lot of folks reach out to us to support our campaign. A lot of people are enthusiastic. Lots of folks who supported the other two gentlemen in the race have reached out. We're on Team Julie now. How can we engage? We really want you to win. And so we're just, we're going to ride that momentum. And like I said, communicate to the voters about the issues. Rising gas prices, every affordability is a huge issue. This war in Iran, what Trump is doing, being able to push back against the administration. People have seen me do that time and time and time again. And people need action right now.
If voters are watching this race, Democratic voters, and wondering why they should vote for you over Colin Allred, what would you tell them that the clearest differences are between you two? You're both Democrats. You both have similar positions on a lot of the red meat issues for Democrats. But what's the clearest difference since you're both experienced with time in Congress?
I think it's about who can get stuff done and who's actually going to work hard. Colin had 6 years in office and he has very little to show for it. In my first term, I've authored legislation across a variety of issues, just like the Vote Act that we just recently introduced to talk about access to the polls, addressing this problem that voters are having on voter suppression. I've led on a lot of these issues. We have a huge upcoming issues with AI. What are we going to do there? How are we going to protect our workforce? Healthcare access. I've clearly led in that space throughout all of my legislative time. People want action. And I think also, people who have served with both of us side by side, Colin was in office for 6 years. I've been in for 1. I've overwhelmingly secured the endorsement of people who have served with both of us from across all broad aspects of the Democratic political spectrum and all of leadership. And I think that should tell the voters something, that the people who have seen us both up close and personal in action have chosen me overwhelmingly.
Let's talk about a piece of legislation you have called the Vote Act. Dallas County had issues on primary night. Republicans and Democrats split up the primary. The GOP decided they didn't want to hold primaries with the Democratic Party. So Democratic voters showed up to places that they've always voted. They got turned away and had to go somewhere else, created tremendous confusion, as you well know, on election night. What exactly would your legislation do to try to correct this?
Well, yeah, the Vote Act is a simple piece of legislation that would have prevented all of this voter confusion that we saw on the Texas primary. But basically what it does is if it requires a lot of advanced notification by the local entity if they're going to change the polling locations. Because that's exactly what we had is people thought they knew where to vote. They had not received appropriate communications from Dallas County elections or from the state telling them where their voting location was going to be, since it was different from the early vote locations and changing from where they normally had voted on election day. And it would just require simple this. You got to tell the voters. You got to tell them 7 days in advance. You got to communicate with them within a variety of contexts and communication in order so that they know how to vote. Because we can't, if people don't know how to vote, that's voter suppression. That's taking away people's rights to actually cast their ballot. And we got to stop that.
Do you think the confusion the Democratic primary voters had on primary night in Dallas County, the trouble that Dallas County itself had, did that cost you any votes?
Well, it's hard to know. People were having a really hard time voting. I was down at one poll and they had actually turned more voters away than were actually out there to vote. And so that we were seeing that time and time throughout the county. And it was horribly communicated. We tried from our campaign. We tried to let everybody know, everybody's door that we knocked. We sent emails. We texted voters. Hey, when they kept the polls open, we sent out blast texts to our voters, hey, you can still vote. We tried, but it also needed to come from Dallas County elections, and they did not do that. And this is a huge problem that Alan West and the Republican chairman created, and they did a terrible job of communicating to voters where the polling places were going to be on election day.
Congressman, one final question for you here. Everyone's watching with anxiety what happens next in the war with Iran. Gas prices already surging. What are you watching for in the coming days, coming weeks here? Because like every war the U.S. has been in for the past 70 years, it looks like this one is likely to drag on.
Right. Well, I'm looking for an exit strategy. How does this thing end quickly? It's hemorrhaging cash. It's hemorrhaging resources that we should be using to pay for affordable prices, groceries, bringing down gas prices. It's escalating gas prices across this country. People are going to really start feeling the squeeze on that. And it's also, the government is still shut down, mind you. I don't know how we could start a war in Iran when the Department of Homeland Security is not funded. And why would the president choose to do that when our government is not fully opened? It's irresponsible. And the fact that Republicans did not vote to take back for the War Powers resolution that I voted for is unconscionable. They're just letting this man run roughshod over the Constitution, over the protocols of how our government is supposed to function. And unfortunately, the American people are going to pay the price.
Here we are in the middle of March, spring break. There's a lot of folks flying, and we're seeing all over the country these long lines with TSA, people trying to get through security, and people coming back into the country who don't have access to global entry if they paid for that program. Do you see any let up, any resolution in sight for Democrats to agree to funding DHS, especially now that Kristi Noem is no longer Homeland Security Secretary?
Well, like I said, we're not going to fund ICE in its current form. We're not going to fund ICE with its current mission and how they're currently operating. It's unacceptable, it's unconstitutional, and it's illegal. And so until they have a wholesale restructuring of how they function and they operate, we're not going to see funding, I think, from the Democratic side. So, this new secretary, they could immediately shift course. They could change how they're doing. They could restructure internally, and then maybe the funding will come. But under this current plan of how it's operating now, that's just not going to happen.
Congresswoman, good to see you. Good luck.
It's so great to be with you too. Thanks so much.